Welcome to the October 15th, 2018 Kubernetes SIG Apps weekly meeting. Let me go ahead and share the agenda doc here into text. Okay, there's the agenda. We've got several things to chat about today. The first thing that I wanted to actually bring up as an announcement was for folks, we are running low on seats for the Contributor Summit. Here, let me share my screen real quick. Here we go. So the Contributor Summit is coming up, the Kubernetes Contributor Summit, and there's actually two parts to it. There is a Contributor Summit, and there is a new contributor track. If you are interested in this stuff, sign up very soon because they will be running out of available slots, and there'll be a waiting list. So here is the details on how that works. You can actually find it in the community repo and events 2018, and then you can find it from there. But that's the one announcement that I had. Did anybody have any other announcements they wanted to share? And this is for Seattle, by the way. Going once, twice. All right, I'm going to assume there are no other announcements. So the next thing that we had on the agenda was actually a KubeDB demo. Are you ready to give that yet?
I need a few more minutes.
Oh, certainly. Then we can jump ahead to one of the discussion topics, and we can circle back to you in a little bit here. Just let me know when you're ready. So in the discussion topic section, you jump down. There were actually two items that I threw in addition to the normal developer tools. They kind of pertain around developer tools, and then we've got open discussion. So if somebody had something that they wanted to throw in here, maybe something specific under developer tools or any of these things, please speak up. But one of the things, I know folks are trying to showcase their stuff and to give feedback on their stuff, and there's a lot of developer tools that are out there, and even just trying to find them. And a while ago, we had talked about building something under SIG Apps to kind of showcase this stuff, and we didn't. And the reason for that was actually because of the CNCF landscape. And here, I'll go ahead and share my screen again. And so there's the CNCF landscape. Are folks familiar with this? I mean, I guess the silence means maybe not.
Besides, I think it's
CNCF
fairly well known.
Okay. So one of the things that's been happening with the landscape lately is redoing the categories. So if you come into categories, there's going to be some differences. And they're pretty general here. But one of the things that I just wanted to make sure is everybody knew to get their stuff included in here if they didn't already have it, because this is kind of that search and discovery mechanism that we had originally thought about doing as part of this or the app dev working group. When this came, we decided not to do something. And so we want to make sure it works, because as the CNCF does things, they can continually iterate and change things. And one of the things they recently did was work on the categories. And so if you come down to things like app, you'll see the CI/CD category, right? And in the CI/CD category, there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's some member companies and projects. There's some who aren't. But even as I looked at this, I thought, ooh, I know of these handful of other things that aren't even listed in here. And so if you don't have your things in here, go for it. In fact, if you come into something like let's go to the application definition and image build, right, category. And so you see the CNCF projects, so Helm and a couple of sandbox projects. If y'all didn't know, build packs, known primarily for things like Cloud Foundry, have made their way as sandbox projects into the CNCF. It's, how do I put this? It's being integrated into other toolings. I want to say Knative. There's ways of doing those things. In addition to that, there are other projects that aren't under the CNCF here. But there are still others that probably could be listed here that aren't in this space. And as I look at this, I'm thinking, I know of a couple that I use that aren't listed here. So if you're not in here already, please, it's as simple as doing a PR against the GitHub repository, which is GitHub CNCF landscape, if I could spell it right. It's actually submitting a pull request against this repo, and then it's generated out of here.
Hey Matt, but where are we supposed to discuss the categories, what the categories are, and I mean, I'm not intending to go and make a big change, but I'd like to kind of have a conversation. Like for instance, this category we're looking at the moment, I don't understand why telepresence is there, and other things. Maybe I would like to be able to look at tools that are specifically for Kubernetes, but at the same time, KubeVirt is another odd one here, right?
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I haven't really dug much into it since the recategorization. So this all happens on the CNCF's reference architecture mailing list, and it happens through the TOC. So I'm going to drop this in here.
Okay.
If you go to list.cncf.io, they do their lists through, what is it called? Groups.io. And the reason for that is Google Groups is not available in China through the web interface. And so people can't sign up and use it in one of the largest markets for the CNCF. And so that's caused them to use an alternative. And so you'll find a bunch of mailing lists that are over here for people to use, whether it's Helm or anything related to the CNCF, the TOC, things like that. The categories are managed by the TOC that has Tuesday calls the second and fourth Tuesday of the month, I want to say. And so that's the group that oversees this. One of the TOC members oversaw the categories, but this is the mailing list where the conversations happened. And so this mailing list or the TOC one, which you can also find on there, are the places to maybe ask those questions. And if you go to this one here, the CNCF reference architecture, you can ask questions about it, and the people who were involved in building it are on this list. They can respond to that.
Okay, thanks. And there's no like, because you said it's on GitHub, right? But like they don't use GitHub issues, do they?
For doing this?
Yeah, for the landscape. I mean, oh, there are issues. Okay,
There are issues, and there's 38 of them right now, I see.
maybe I'll open an issue. All right, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and making changes is just a pull request away because that's how it's all handled. In fact, if you get into this, oh no, it's been a while since I've managed this. So if you go into things like main.specs, oh, it's not in here. Okay. There is, oh, it's in here. Yes. You will see things like, here's many of the linked files. Well, here's all the landscapes that are generated because they generate PDF versions and all that other detail from it. And there's a serverless one as well. There's a trim. They've got a bunch of stuff. I'm trying to remember where the config is in here. Right here, sorry. There's a YAML file with all of the repos in here, along with details on them. And so you can see things like your category name, your subcategory. So even changing things is as simple as moving things around in a YAML file.
Cool, thanks so much.
Or adding things. So, and they're always trying to improve on this stuff and get feedback for future iterations on it. A new iteration just came out. But are there any other questions or things on this? If you have suggestions, please pass them along. The TOC and the CNCF is trying to make this as useful as possible. In fact, one of the areas they've gone into recently is the serverless one, which is a landscape just for serverless, and they've got a print version of it. And you see there's certain things like, you can zoom in. And so you can see there's things like here's different tools and security, and there's frameworks for it. There's platforms where it's hosted, which is where you're going to get things like Lambda, or installable, which is where you get something like Kubeless and Knative, and Riff is now on there. So it gives you some ideas of even what's in the market and where they're at. Anybody have any other questions on this? Anybody had any other feedback? Because I can carry it to the TOC if we wanted to have something to share. All right. All right. So if you do have something in the future, because I do attend the TOC meetings, feel free to shoot it my way, and I'm very happy to pass it along. With that, I think we're ready for our demo on KubeDB. Are you ready?
Yes, I think I'm ready.
Okay. The floor is yours. You can go ahead and screen share and get going.
Hi, this is Sam. from Xcode, currently working on this project called KubeDB. We are making KubeDB to so that people can deploy production grade database easily in Kubernetes, but we are making it also highly configurable so user can configure as their needs. We are packing some necessary steps that are helpful for production, all one place. The main cool thing is about KubeDB. If you know how to deploy one database in KubeDB, but you will able to deploy everything, every supported database in KubeDB with KubeDB. Our every database structure is similar, and everything works in similar flow. Here is a list of some supported database. We have instant backup, scheduled backup, initialization, and building Prometheus monitoring system. And yeah, of course, we have clustering too. Today, I will show a short demo how to deploy a Postgres cluster with KubeDB. And if I get time, I can show maybe instance backup. Okay, I have already installed KubeDB in my cluster. You can see here KubeDB operator for running. When KubeDB is installed, it has created some CRD called database version. For example, for Postgres, it have created some Postgres version CRD. Okay. These are supported version by KubeDB 0.9. These Postgres version CRD hold a Docker images. Let's describe one. 10.2 V1. Okay. Here you can see DB image. This image is used for deploy, create the database Postgres 10.2, and this exporter image is used to export Prometheus metrics, and this tools image is used to export backup and recover database. This separating this Postgres version, creating this separate CRD for these images help us to modify Docker images without changing our operator, without any modification of our operator. It also provides user to use their custom operator too. Okay, here we will create a Postgres cluster named PG cluster demo. We are going to use Postgres version. This is the Postgres version CRD we have shown just before. We are going to create 3 replicas. So there will be 3 pod. One of them will act as master, and other 3 will act as a standby replica. Master will be selected by leader direction. Then here we have standby mode. It can be either warm or hot. Warm standby mode means you cannot connect the standby replica. This standby replica only will be used for any failover situation. But if you use hot standby mode, then you will be able to connect with the standby replicas and serve read-only queries, but not write queries, only read-only queries from these replicas. Okay, then we have here specified storage required for each replicas. Then finally we have another thing called termination policy. This is specify when you try to deploy delete this Postgres CRD, what KubeDB will do. I have currently we support 4 termination policy: do not terminate, pause, delete, and wipe out. Do not terminate. If you use do not terminate termination policy, when you try to delete this Postgres version CRD, KubeDB will reject the request. This prevent accidental deletion of the database. Okay, let's create. Okay. Okay, it is created. Let's see. It will get 3 pods. Okay, we already have 1 pod running, creating. Let's watch it. Okay, pods are coming up. Okay, another pod. We have 3rd pod coming. Okay, all parts are up. Let's describe. Let's see. Let's see here. When all pods are goes in running state, our Postgres CRD will also go in running state. Let's describe. KubeDB will create two service for this Postgres database. One for certificate service. Done. Okay, this service created for master replica, so we can use this service to connect with our application, and this service is created for standby replicas. We can serve read-only queries from this replicas from the service. Okay, let me show another thing. Okay. If we try to see levels, cluster, okay, we can see there kubedb.com kind, kubedb.com name. Yeah, here is the kubedb.com rules. So PG cluster demo 0 is working as primary, and other 2 is working as replica. Their role is replica. They are working as a standby replica. Now time to connect from PG admin. Okay, let's connect. Okay, we will use the service for master. It is in demo namespace, so I am adding demo. Okay, we need username and password. KubeDB has also created secret for our database. This auth secret hold our credential. Postgres password and Postgres user, we need to decode them. Okay. So our username is Postgres. We need to know also password. Yeah, this is our password. You can also use your own secret on username, on password. But if you don't provide your own secret, KubeDB will just create for you. Okay, let's connect with our database.
think we lost audio.
Oh, yeah. Hello? Can you hear us?
Oh, sorry, my microphone was off accidentally.
That's all right. We lost it about 30 seconds ago or so.
Okay. This from here we are saying settings about Postgres replicas. We can see here we have two replicas and they are streaming replicas. Now I will show how to do automatic failover. I will try to force master node to fail. I will delete the pod, and one of this replica will take over as master. Okay, our PG demo 0 was acting as master. Let's delete it. Zero. Oops. Okay. Okay, this pod is terminating. New photo will come up, and one of them will take over as master. Let's wait few seconds. Okay, let's see which pod is acting as master now. Okay. Oh, demo 0 didn't lose master role yet. Okay, let's delete it again. Okay, let's see. Wow, it still did not lose master role yet. Let's wait few seconds. Failover is not happening as expected.
The age is only a few seconds old. And so is it being recreated automatically?
Yes, it's being recreated because all the pods are under a stateful state.
So even when it's deleted, it's immediately recreated, which is why it's a few seconds old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Now PG cluster demo 1 is acting as master and newly created acting as replica. So this was automatic failover. As do you want to see instant backup? If you have time, I can show.
Well, how long will it take to show the instant backup?
2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, sure.
Okay. KubeDB watches for snapshot CRD. This is a snapshot CRD. If we schedule configure schedule backup, this CRD will be automatically created by KubeDB and new snapshot will be created. But now in our case, we will take backup instantly. So we will create this CRD and KubeDB will take a snapshot. Here we are saying that we will take Postgres database and this database name here. We'll use a GCS bucket, and I have already created a secret for GCS, probably. No. Yeah. Okay, let's get snapshot. Okay. Okay, snapshot created. KubeDB will launch a job. This job will run pgdump, then upload the snapshot to the cloud. Let's see. Snapshot. Okay, snapshot is running. Let's see. Snapshot is success. So database already started our KubeDB dump file. KubeDB. Okay, this is our bucket. Yeah, here you will see dump file. Instant snapshot. This is our database dump file created by instant snapshot. We can use this snapshot to reinitialize another database, or that's all.
Okay, thank you. Do folks have any questions? And I see the first question is, do you use Vitess for MySQL?
Again, please.
Do you use Vitess, the project Vitess, for your MySQL integration?
No.
Okay. With Snapshot. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, somebody else. Go
Any
ahead.
specific reasons to that? Just curious, because I thought, well, from what I understood, Vitess was the kind of the go-to solution for MySQL on Kubernetes that is backed by the MySQL community. I wonder whether you have any specific reasons why you diverge from that path.
Again, please.
Well, from what I understood, Vitess is a project that is backed by CNCF, and it is a go-to solution for running MySQL on Kubernetes. So I was wondering whether you have any specific reasons for not using it.
Yeah, sure. Our KubeDB operator does not work only for MySQL, and it will work for all 6 database listed. We are adding also etcd. So we are taking all database into a general structure, general platform. So if you can deploy MySQL with KubeDB, you will able to deploy all of them other. However, furthermore, we have some special facilities such as clustering, backup, and initialization from snapshot or pair additional skip. And for Postgres, we have also used initialization from wall archive. So our main goal is to take all the database, all the necessary database into a general platform and general structure. So user don't have to learn learn different operator. They don't need to know different operator for different database.
Okay, I see. So that you just have different approach where you generalize for other databases also. Okay, well that sort of makes sense. So in effect, your product is competing with Vitess, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I look at this, it seems more like. Oh, go ahead.
So Vitess and CockroachDB for MySQL, and I believe CockroachDB is Postgres interface at this point. They're a very different architecture from what KubeDB does. Like Vitess is a scale-out, sharded, replicated MySQL database with automated leader election. It uses InnoDB and MySQL under the hood, but it's its own distributed system that's kind of been architected from scratch to run natively in a cloud-native environment like Kubernetes, or you could probably get it to run on Mesos. Same thing for CockroachDB. CockroachDB is, again, sharded, replicated, my scale-out Postgres front-end database that runs in an architecture that's very different from what KubeDB offers. KubeDB is actually running MySQL directly and Postgres directly using the replication technologies provided with those systems. So you would use them for different reasons, I would say.
Okay, so you don't actually offer clustering on top of MySQL as such in the same way that Vidas does. You just offer replication basically.
That's what. Well, this is Ken. I don't work on the KubeDB project, but I've looked at it. I'm familiar with it. So it's not the same thing that Vitess does. Vitess is very, very different.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I was going to say, I think there's slightly different use cases for some of this, right? So KubeDB is kind of providing a SaaS solution, essentially through Kubernetes for folks to say, give me a database of this type, or give me some clusters and the features you'd get around it if you were using something, say, in a public cloud. And I think for folks who do on-premise or aren't in one of the 3 major public clouds and are just looking to get some of this going, it provides a number of those SaaS-like features through a Kubernetes native interface. And that's where there might be some real interest.
Okay, so that sort of leads towards my other question, which was about service catalog and service broker type stuff. So this seems to do similar things. What do you see as an advantage of using KubeDB over service broker, for example?
We are already integrating service broker with KubeDB.
Hey, so this is Kamal. I think I work with Imrose on this project. Yeah, so I can answer this question. So the answer to that question is, so service brokers that are available today on various cloud providers, kind of running the databases on that, like sort of on the hosted cloud provider solution. But with KubeDB, you are running databases inside your Kubernetes cluster, and you can run that like on your bare metal or on the cloud provider or any cloud provider that doesn't have its own hosted database. So we also have a service broker interface. So if you would like to access KubeDB managed databases through a service broker interface, you'd be able to do that. Yeah, so that's sort of how it works both.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. But you could also create, you could also manage the database instances directly with your own CRDs, right?
Yeah, and the advantage with the managing with our own CRDs is this, because they are not like a generic. Well, there are 2 advantages. One is that they are not generic like service broker interface. So like we use the validation admission controller validation webhook technique that like Imrose mentioned to like implement that like do not terminate feature. So if you try to delete a KubeDB CRD, it will, if you have that field set, then it will essentially reject your delete operation. But that kind of thing you cannot really do with a service broker. That's one problem. And the second problem with service broker, I think, is that it uses the aggregation service. So you need to have your own HCD and all that. I mean, if it moves to like a CRD, at least that problem goes away, but it's not the case today.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, makes sense. And
go ahead, sorry.
Presumably some people prefer like more direct abstraction, right?
Yeah.
Now, did you say you were going to have service broker integration? So somebody could say use KubeDB in their on-premise data center, and then in Azure or AWS or in Google Cloud, they could switch to whatever that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we already have a project on our GitHub repo. We just it's still sort of alpha, but we'll release that soon. Yeah.
Oh. All right. Thank you. This looks great. I look forward to seeing where this goes.
Thank you.
All right. So the next thing that we had in our agenda for today was to look at the user profiles. A few weeks ago, I started talking about the user profile work that we'd started. And the user profiles, here, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I've started the work, and I was looking for some initial feedback on this. So I'm sharing my screen again, and here's the document that I started. It's actually pretty rough. What I've broken it down to is 3 major categories, and so I really want feedback here. Like, what do y'all think? And so I've got 3 major areas here. First, there's the application operator. Then there's the application developer. And then there's the Kubernetes Workloads API contributor. I know the contributor experience folks get into some of this stuff, but since we own the Workloads API, it would be nice to maybe have some details on this, but I put that kind of third down here. And for application operator and developer, I kind of sub-broke that down, and I'm curious what folks think about that. Because I kind of got into it, like if you're doing functions as a service, right, as a user, like I'm writing functions and I'm sticking them into my event-based system, Knative, Kubeless, whatever, you're almost operating mini applications. And so I thought about putting that in as kind of a sub area. If you're doing PaaS on Kubernetes, what kind of things matter there? And one of the things that caught my attention, if folks don't know, Cloud Foundry released a new project to use Kubernetes as a scheduler instead of Diego. I think it's in their labs incubating. I'm forgetting the term that they use over there, but it's a new thing that was released. And then of course the what I'll call the traditional Kubernetes app operation. So I kind of broke those down, thinking there might be some slightly different workflow and details in these areas we could suss out. What do folks think of this? I got question marks next to the FAS and the PaaS ones because I was just spitballing on this. What do y'all think?
Yeah, like, well, the application operator, does an application operator often cluster operator also? I mean, is it like one and the same person most of the time?
I'm going to argue no. As far as roles go, I would argue no. I think in practical measure, probably not. At a lot of companies, you'll have maybe, especially large companies, you'll have one group that does the cluster operation, and you might even punt a lot of that to a public cloud, where then somebody else is doing the application operation in the cluster. And so it's kind of a different scoped role. In fact, a lot of teams who do app development may end up deploying and operating their own apps in there, and they may not deal with the cluster operation at all. What do you think of that? Silence. Does that mean this all looks good right here?
I just kind of like presumably we'll understand that lines blur for many people, and you know, kind of like it's all very relative, but depends what we want to achieve with this.
And I tend to look at this more as roles, right? They're separate roles, but the same person may do more than one role. Or and that'll happen in some companies, and in other companies it might be different. Like in a small startup, you might just have a handful of people who occupy all of the roles. And yet in a large corporation, it's pretty easy to segment each of these into different roles that may even be in different departments that are matrixed together in crazy ways, right? It really depends. And so breaking them down into roles was kind of my way of conceptualizing it. What do you think about that?
I mean, does anyone else have any thoughts? Because I mean, I just generally tend to, I don't exactly believe separating these things out, but maybe I haven't worked in a large enough team to kind of convince myself on that. But I do think that to some extent, most recently, like all the things to do with DevOps and such, it was mostly about trying to blend these lines even more. And I wonder whether that's a good idea to kind of separate them out. But like, for what purpose again, right? I'm not entirely, still, it's not very clear to me still. What are we trying to achieve by defining this?
In this case, I think it's more of a description. We'd like to capture the information on folks, and I'm sorry, we were talking about this a while ago, but I want to capture the information on who these folks are to try to understand who's doing these different roles, because I think it's important if we're building things for folks to understand them, because their biases may not be ours. And I think that when I realized that was the first time that I was introduced to an application that had 500 engineers working on it, and it was one application. And so there were many distinct people wearing different hats for the different roles because there were so many people on them. And I'm now aware, there's single applications that have 1,000 engineers working on them. And they're complex, but on a lot of those, you'll have different people who do slightly different things. And this was kind of some of that stuff that I ended up dealing with the separation. And here we're trying to just maybe target the ones that specifically apply to Kubernetes, like where Kubernetes meets the end users in particular roles. And I could be wrong on some of this, but that's why I'm asking feedback.
Okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it'd be good to kind of break it, expand this a little bit, right? To start with, and like sort of add some examples of what those folks do and what actually application means in these cases. I'd presume application could be something that consists of like several different pods, like as in deployments in a cluster, right? So several different workloads, like microservices or whatever.
Yeah, it could be one microservice that you're responsible for. An application could be made up of multiple microservices. It's kind of a squishy term. Totally realize that. In fact, when we get into application developer, you'll see that I even kind of changed some of this up a little here, right? Looking at some of this, because there's Kubernetes native application developers, and like there's folks who are just trying to build things using APIs. Like they may get something in through one deployment of an application, and then that deployment goes off, and to do certain pieces of work, it runs jobs to do the work then, right? And it's actually using the Kubernetes API in order to get things done. And I would call that maybe more Kubernetes native applications. But then there's traditional stuff like Maria or MySQL that we just saw, or Postgres, right, that are kind of more traditional. And in that case, somebody who's going to develop some complexity would be like the KubeDB developers, or somebody building a controller or operator, really, around managing some of those applications to add the intelligent business logic like we saw in today's demo.
Right. So, okay, so then, I mean, in the operations, application operators category, would you consider like folks who use off-the-shelf applications and make sure that they run happily, or predominantly, I'm thinking, right?
Certainly.
Or,
yeah,
or that would also include like in-house applications.
Yes, because you're doing the duty of operating it rather than necessarily developing it. And like in open source, we use so many different things that come from so many places. Right? Somebody who's building a WordPress site might have some custom business logic, and yet they may be running Nginx in front of it and MySQL behind it. Maybe there's a caching server somewhere in there. All of these things they got from other places, and they're going to operate it. And I use WordPress because it's the example everyone uses, but there's all these other components that you're operating you got from elsewhere. Yet there's some custom business logic too.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be good to kind of expand a little bit more like on some of these things, right? And write out some of the example applications in some of these cases, and kind of be more specific. That then there'll be a bit more to discuss, because at the moment all there is to discuss is like the question of whether these lines should be defined at all. So just expanding that a little bit more with specific cases, like where does, for example, right, where does who would be running like the service broker or KubeDB? Who would be looking after that? Would there be the applications operator, or that's actually cluster operator who's not defined here, right? So like the infrastructure pieces, I think it could be. I mean, I think it may make sense to also define a category of sort of infrastructure operator, not specifically cluster operator, but maybe things that run in the cluster that are crucial to running all the applications, right? Like databases or something. And application operator would be more specifically about applications that are built by the application developers in the same team or something like that. I don't know. Maybe that sort of thing. What do you think?
No, I think that's really good. Here, I'll add a note here. Infra. I'll come clean this up later.
But then if you're doing that, perhaps like infra developer is also a role, right? And then maybe that's where the controllers fall.
Yes, it might be. Yeah.
Something to think about.
Yeah, it is. No, this is definitely, I like this view here, because one of the things that I would love to get to, and up here I talk about what details do we describe under there. goals, motivations, work descriptions, areas of interest, frustrations, because those always provide a nice source for opportunity. Their news and info sources, because ultimately I'd like to have something that we could show people around here who are building things and say, come, here's what your end users kind of look like. Go read up on it and go learn more about them by following more links. Because one of the problems that we have is we in Kubernetes are kind of on our Kubernetes island. It can be in a bit in our Kubernetes bubble, and we don't necessarily see everything off of that bubble. So how do we get people to start seeing some of those things to start understand what else is out there and what's going on in the broader
that's
system?
a good point, actually. Yeah, now I completely understand what we're talking about here. Yeah, because I did struggle with that being the case sometimes, right? You come to talk to a few Kubernetes developers in whatever setting that is, whether that's a SIG or working group meeting or at KubeCon or whatnot. And when you talk about something, people seem to think about very Kubernetes specific cases, right? So you talk about build, people think about Kubernetes build system inside of Kubernetes repo, right? They don't necessarily think about any specific build systems that users may be using. Anything like that, right? And that's something that makes me hard. It makes it quite hard to have a conversation about the actual use cases of the end users with people, because people think about Kubernetes project first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this would be very helpful for that.
Yeah, okay. That's what we're trying to write. So if you're interested in this, there's a link to the document. Feel free to put notes in there or make comments or ask questions, as somebody is doing right now. I know Hippie Hacker here also had a question on bringing up the Kubernetes native one. Since we've only got about 8 minutes left, I wanted to give him a quick second. You still there, Hippie Hacker?
I am. Can you hear me?
I am. By the way, thank you for those other comments. Please continue them in this doc if you've got them.
Sure.
Hippie Hacker just wanted to talk about some of this. I wanted to give him a minute.
One of the things I've been doing with the CNCF is trying to create a application that's snooping on our API traffic that all of us can contribute data to in order to get some deep understanding of our community. The reason behind that is we have this CNCF Kubernetes conformance effort where it's a definition of who we are as a community, not as people, but as an API, right? And in order for that to be representative, I feel we really need to ask the community to contribute data on their actual logs on how they're using Kubernetes. And as I've been kind of following around in the SIG Apps lurking area, the definition of profiles and the overlap with some of my goals on trying to, as we plow through this data, looking at the patterns of usage. And I think it might be pretty relevant to help define what is a FAS operation. Well, if you have clusters that look like this, that's going to look more like a FAS or a PaaS or traditional or an infra operator. And one of the things that I'm looking at right now as far as data sources on that is trying to decide which applications best represent heavy usage of our community. And so pulling from there, and then being continuously pulling the newest versions of those applications and creating audit logs. Audit logs contain all of the API information about the call, including the application that called it. And I'm trying to create some extensions so that every API call also includes the call stack, all the way down through the client libraries and whatnot. But I just wanted to, I probably need to put this on the mailing list or something, but
no, I mean, that makes sense. In fact, what I was wondering is, so earlier we talked about the CNCF landscape. Would it be something worth, I don't know if they've got tags in there, but being able to tag which things in there might be Kubernetes native, and then somehow getting a proud job that goes and analyzes how they use the Kubernetes API and somehow intertwine that stuff? I don't know whether it would be possible, but because then you could look at things like Knative and Brigade and kubeless and kubedb, and then look at how they're using the API. Would that be the kind of thing we could do, or are you still there? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think we might have lost Hippie Hacker. All right, it looks like we did. Hopefully we'll get him back. I can reach out to him offline. Do any other folks have comments or thoughts on this stuff? Well, if you do, please feel free to jump into the document. As more stuff comes in, yep, I'll post a link to this document. It's also in today's agenda. Please, comments, feedback. This thing is very rough right now, considered a draft of a draft, just trying to get ideas down. And this is kind of scratch space. And once there's something worth presenting, we'll put it into the community repo. All right. Then at this point, we have developer tools discussion and obviously open discussion. Did folks have other things they wanted to chat about today? Okay. If anybody has a demo they would like to have, we've got open demo slots in the next few weeks. So please come reach out to us if you've got something you want to demo or showcase or talk through. Next week, we'll be back talking about the Workloads API stuff. With that, does anybody have any final parting thoughts, words, ideas, anything? Then thank you all and have a wonderful week. We'll be back here next week. Thanks, everyone. And recording stopped. And with that,
everyone else has left the call.